Howdy folks. So we've got my father's 1992 Dodge pickup here, Cummins 3/4 ton, and it's got a power steering leak coming out of the input shaft on the steering box. So the leak's coming out right here where the steering column shaft goes into the box. I'm planning on doing this all on the vehicle. I mean, you could take the power steering pump off, but there's plenty of room under here, so I don't see why I can't do this with it on the truck. The tricky part's probably going to be getting this coupler off. I've fought doing that in the past on other rigs, because there's a spline shaft under there, and that all has to come off before you can get the seal and the dust or whatever the heck. I think there's a dust seal and another seal underneath. I can't remember under that. So my thought is, if I can take it apart at the rag joint, and if there's enough slop in this shaft to get it away from the steering column, the rest of the steering column, I should be able to get this all out. Just this short shaft here, I'll show you on top. The rag joint I'm talking about is right there. So that should only have a couple of bolts that ties it to that. If I can unbolt that and get that slopped out of the way enough to be able to still get it shoved up towards the driver, because the shaft's gonna have to come out, or this coupler's gonna have to slide off probably an inch or more to get it off those splines. So we've got to have enough travel this way. And heck, maybe even that cup's got enough travel, because you can see that slot that this thing's made to kind of have a little bit of give to it. So we'll dig into this, and I will update you as it goes, and hopefully we can get this done today. First thing I like to do before I get started is get your favorite penetrating oil. I like PB Blaster, or a lot of times I make my own 50-50 mix of acetone and automatic transmission fluid. It works really good. So I'm just gonna get those rag joint bolts sprayed there, let that soak a little bit, and then we'll start seeing if I can crack that apart. The bolts that are on this rag joint, they're 3/8 and they're a 12 point. So if you want to use an impact gun or a ratchet wrench, make sure you've got a 12-point socket that can get on those. These little compact, man, I love these little impact guns. I don't know if I can use it come from on the other end, but it's sure nice, because when you put a wrench on the steering column, it's going to want to turn. So you have to wedge a pry bar in there, screwdriver, have somebody hold the steering wheel. I'd be nervous against going against the steering wheel lock. You could probably do that and be okay, but I would probably rather have you could even probably just put a wrench or something on that to hold it. Maybe, I don't know, if you could get a pipe wrench, probably too big. Anyway, you get an impact gun on there, you don't have to worry about it fighting against you when you're turning those to get them loose. So again, 3/8 12-point socket or box end wrench might be fine too. Just want to show you real fast, I am able to get that impact gun even on the other side, this compact one. Kind of see just enough room to kind of come up from the bottom there and get it on that bolt. Okay, got the rag joint out. I'm not positive it matters which direction this goes, but I know if I put it back in the direction I took it out, it will fit. So I just put the bolts back in there to keep track of everything. The bolts on towards the driver, on the driver's, well, say the driver's side, the upper side, they're a little bit longer than the ones on the pump side or the steering box side. So definitely want to keep track of the orientation of those at least. So with that guy out, we do have quite a bit of room there to mess with, and it even does have enough flexibility to come out above that shaft. So I think we should have plenty of room to get this off the steering box without messing with the steering column, which is super awesome if that's the case. We won't know until we get a little farther along here, but looking good so far. Next thing we got to get out is this roll pin. So that'll go all the way through to the other side, so I need to knock that out with a punch. So I guess it's food for thought that you might, before you get the steering column or the rag joint completely out, maybe get this in about where you want it, because you're not going to be able to turn the steering wheel and turn the front tires. But mine wasn't quite right, so I just came out here and just started kicking and pulling on the tire, and that turn this to where I need it. Or you can put a wrench or something on there, probably twist it, but whatever works for you. But you have to get this lined up to where you can get a hammer and a punch on it from From here, I'll show you a little closer what that looks like. So I'll show you when I get out, but that's just a steel looking pin thing with a slot on it, slot down the side. You'll see when I get it out. Well, I got pretty fortunate. I just put a couple of these pry bars here between that, and it slid right up. So pretty fortunate about that. I did scribe a couple little marks here. Hopefully a guy can only put this on one way, because you got to line up that. Well, maybe you don't have to, but so I'd recommend probably scribing marks to get that back where it was before you get it apart. So I'll get that popped off here now, but I've already got it to slide 1/4 inch, and I think usually once they're moving, you're golden after that. Okay, well, mine came apart easy peasy. I hope you have the same fortunate luck as I have. So this shaft isn't slotted all the way around. I've seen them where you've got this same indent that goes all the way around, so it'll allow you to put that coupler on anywhere and still get the roll pin in. But in this one, you don't even be able to get that pin in that one spot, so another reason to keep that lined up good. I didn't take the pin all the way out because I just knocked it out enough to get it out of the center. That'll make it easier, I think, to put it back in, but that's what it looks like. You can usually get this at the hardware store, auto parts store, if you do need to replace one. We'll just leave it halfway in there, that way it'll be easy to drive back through. And again, taking it off of the reg joint worked just perfect. There was plenty of slack, so we can just set that off to the side for now. Okay, it looks like the next step's going to be, we've got a snap ring in there, so I've got this wire brushed and blew some air on it, so we'll get that snap ring out. And then it looks like that must take like a spanner wrench to get that out, which I don't know if I have one of those, so I might have to put a bolt in each one of them, use a screwdriver or something. We'll see what I got. I can't remember. Okay, got the snap ring out. I guess this is a good time to mention that if you don't have a good pair of snap ring pliers, which I do not, a guy ought to treat himself, because it can make these kind of things easier. When I pulled this out of the toolbox, it didn't have the bolt in the middle. I had to go find one. So I've got some smaller snap ring pliers that are even crappier than these, so I think I'll order a new pair of good snap ring pliers for next time. I don't know why I don't have it as it is, but this worked just fine. But just wanted to mention, treat yourself. Get a nice tool once in a while. Okay, so I looked through my toolbox, and the spanner wrench I have is too big for this. It's for doing like hydraulic cylinders on tractors and stuff. So we'll see if I can't do the old bolt trick or something and get that out of here. But the next thing we got to do is get this thing here is like a lock nut. So I think I can just pry and back or tap that and start backing this off, and that should allow us to take that piece out next. I've decided before I get this loose, as I was going, I'm not sure on the nut, the lock nut part, it's a big deal, but I've gone ahead and punched a little punch marks here, that on the case. I think I'm more concerned about lining this up with that, because there might be a tension or a setting on that. So I figure as long as I put it right back where it was after we're done, I should be fine. So I just use a center punch and punch, so we can line all that stuff back up later. The ring seems to be kind of wanting to stay on there pretty good, so I'm just going to take my heat gun here, warm that up all the way around there, and see if I can get it to pop off. Considering it's a power steering pump with fluid in it, I want to use a actual torch, so we'll just do it with the heat gun here. Take a little longer, but it'll get it plenty hot. Okay, so with a little heat and persuasion, so what I did is I just found an old bar, piece of pipe or something would work. That'll grab the lip of that nut thing, and then just a big ball peen hammer here. So just after warming it up for a while, gave it some good wraps with that, and we've got it broke loose now, so making some headway. So I can't find a spanner wrench that's small enough to fit on that, which I probably should have suspected. So I found this old pair of pliers and a crap spanner wrench off a cheap Chinese die grinder or something like that. So I'm just gonna chop these tabs off weld them to the ends of these pliers and see if that won't work as a makeshift spanner wrench. So we'll give it a try here. So here we got it, spanner pliers, I guess. I don't know if this will work, but we'll give it a go. As one very intelligent Canadian once said, if women don't find you handsome, they should at least find you handy. So we'll see if being handy works out today. So my new fancy pliers do work, spanner wrench, but it's still not quite enough to get this off. I was afraid to really go to town on it, so I'm gonna apply some more heat to this guy and see if that doesn't help me break it loose. Just gonna try to warm it up short of starting a fire, hopefully, and give it another try. I did put some penetrating lube on this before I even started, so maybe that and some heat here will be able to get this thing apart. Well, I gotta say, I think these did work pretty well, but this thing's it's in there pretty good. I ended up busting off a stud, which I'm sure these aren't anything hardened special type deals, but man, this thing's on there pretty good. I even gave it a bunch more heat, some more of that acetone transmission 50-50 mix, kind of let it boil and simmer in there. I'm gonna have to get actually a good spanner wrench, I think, to get this thing off. I think my makeshift plan was not a bad plan, but this guy's just got a little too much corrosion on it or something. But I've been heating this whole housing, and I mean, I guess I could barely touch it now, but just barely. I got it pretty good and hot, and I just still can't get it to budge, so I'm gonna have to come up with a more proper tool, I guess. I didn't completely give up on my homemade spanner wrench stuff, so I came up with this little guy here. I just used 1/4-inch bolts and ground them down a little bit. Basically, I just ground the threads off, and then that gives them about a 3/16 diameter, and those would fit in, excuse me, those would fit in there, but it started to bend these tabs, so that, I mean, it worked, but it didn't, just not beefy enough. So then I upgraded it to this guy here, big piece of metal, and cut the hole out, and same idea, and it still can't get it. And I put that big pipe on there. It's wanting to, these pins are wanting to jump out though, so and I'll have to take the tire off to get enough room in here. But even this guy on there, I mean, it's bending those, so we're gonna maybe try some grade 8 bolts or something else, but I don't think these are supposed to come out that hard. So I've been putting heat on it, more penetrating fluid, and I even tried to just, one trick I looked up online was just put like a Allen wrench in there and hit it with a hammer, and that's just starting to wall the hole out, and I don't want to tear the holes out any worse than they are. So we're gonna see what we can get. The hardware store, maybe they have some 3/16 pins or something we can cut and weld to this bar, or we'll keep on trying. But I mean, we're putting enough force, that whole steering box, you could feel it twisting on the frame, and it still wasn't budging. So we'll keep trying, but this part's being a bit of a butt. Well, we finally got this thing to break loose. Ended up having to put some real heat on. I got just one of those little bottle torches. Got it good and heat soaked, and even then I was literally bending this bar that I made as my tool, and we upgraded to grade 8 1/4-inch bolts. Those seem to hold up a little better. Another trick that I learned is make them just long enough to seat down in the holes. If they're any longer, it just kind of works against you. So I tried the old chisel trick, which I've seen, you know, which I've always considered abuse on hydraulic cylinders, but I thought maybe the impact would help. So I don't know if that's going to end up ruining this whole thing completely or not, but that didn't work. And then I took and started whacking on the outside of this housing with a hammer just to see if that impact would help. And then some more heat, and then finally I got it to crack loose with this bar, and then adding that, like that 3-foot chunk on the end of it, I was able to finally get this thing to break loose. But even after almost a full round turn, I still couldn't do it with this little wrench here. Now it's getting loose enough. I think I can work it the rest of the way off with this, my little homemade one. But yeah, I would hope that you don't run into this. We might be just looking at replacing the steering box at this point if that nut there is toast, but we'll see once I get it out and clean it out. Hopefully I didn't damage the threads too much. I can still get the lock nut on there. So if that's the case, we'll be fine. But I was not expecting this part to be such a hassle, but I don't think this is normal. I think we're just kind of having bad luck here. And finally out enough to start draining some fluids, so we're on the home stretch. So I don't think I damaged those threads at all enough to hurt. I think I can clean that up enough. I think that'll be fine. And we'll just get all the power steering fluid drained out of here and get it removed out the rest of the way. Okay, we're on the bench now with the part that we need to replace the seals on. Kit that I bought hopefully is right. It's a Gates part number 351 320. It's got a fuse seals in them. I don't know if this is, yeah, we'll put these in. So I think these two go in here. So this will just, like, we already took the snap ring off prematurely, I guess, before I even got this thing off. So this thing should just slide right up off of here like that. And then I can pry those seals out, take that O-ring off. Well, that's all the seals that we have. I thought it might come with these guys here, but I guess that's not needed for this. So it's just an O-ring and then those two seals. So you see I got it screwed back in there as far as I could go, pretty much hand tight. And now I'll take a punch and just start working that seal out of there. So prying those seals out with that punch worked really easy. I can just get underneath of it and pop them out. Nothing exciting there. I've kept them in the same orientation. I pulled them out so I can compare them to the new ones before I put them back in there. But what I was just working on is cleaning the chisel up here. So I kind of got down into the snap ring groove there, so I've cleaned that up. I just used my little die grinder here with a cutoff wheel, real carefully got in there. And I did the same thing with the threads, because this kind of got into the threads there, so I've cleaned those up enough to straighten it up. One thing that I did notice is we were putting so much force on these holes that actually made them oblong a little bit, enough to kind of just push out a little bit out that way. And it kind of affects the tension of that lock nut, but you can't really see that very well. But there's a little bit of a rise out towards the threads from that hole being kind of just shoved outward, kind of deflecting the metal. Anyway, the nut goes on there just kind of stiff, but hopefully that's not going to be a problem. We'll do what we can. I cleaned the threads out with a wire brush, or on my bench grinder I've got a brush. So there's some corrosion in that, but pitting, but we'll put it back together and hope for the best. The next thing I'll do is inspect this shaft here where it rides along the seal, make sure that's nice and smooth. If it's not, I'll take some emery cloth, something real fine, and buff that up a little bit before I slip it over to the new seal. So if there's any kind of a burr or something on there, it'll wipe your seals right back out and you'll be back to square one. And if it gets too worn, there'll be a ridge there and that might not seal either, and you might be toast, but we'll hope for the best here. Gone ahead and took some 2000 grit sandpaper and just buffed that shaft up a little bit. There's a little bit of a kind of some wear right there at the tip of my thumb, so I didn't feel anything, but I went ahead and hit it with that just to be safe. So now get the new seals stuck in there, snap ring back on there, new O-ring, and then make sure you're oiling these up with the power steering fluid when you put them back in. Keep all your seals lubed up so you don't ruin them when you go to stick them in there. Just in case you do get your seals turned around, the first I'm going to put in looks like an axle seal, kind of like a dust seal, where it's got a little spring around it. So that goes like that, spring side into the fitting. And then this other one has kind of a recess to it, a raised part in the middle. So the raised part goes out, so it goes in like that. So I got the seal all oiled up with power steering fluid. Now I found a socket that just barely fits inside there. It happens to be a 13/16 impact socket, so I'll set that on there and just tap it in with the hammer until it seats. Okay, got both the new seals in. The outer one I was able just to push in by hand. It doesn't go in too hard, so again, get it good and lubed up. Now put the snap ring on there, and then just lube up the O-ring with some power steering fluid, and it just goes in this groove right there. We are ready to go back together. There's the new O-ring, new seals in there with the new snap ring. So I'm going to put some never sees on these threads this time. Maybe that'll help if I have to take it back apart again. And then line up my dots, the punches that I put a little punch. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, got it run back down on there. What I did is I just went in until it got tight, and then I backed it off to where my little punch marks line up. And that's, so I guess what you're supposed to do when you're setting these up from the factory is they tighten them up and then back them off 5 millimeters or something like that. So your punch mark shouldn't be where this is tight. It should be tight and then back off to where your alignment was before you took it apart. So now I'll fight and try to get the lock nut on there and keep this aligned as I tighten the lock nut on it. Lock nut is back on, and I'd also dimpled it. I don't know if I can show you, but I dimpled the lock nut right there along that same line. That way it's back down to the same tightness it was from the factory. So I'll get the steering shaft back on here, fill it full of fluid, and see if it pukes oil out again or not. See if what we did actually worked. All right, we're all back together, ready for a road trip. I wouldn't say it's as easy as I thought, but it's not as hard as I thought. I don't know. Getting that nut out of there was a pain in the butt. If you don't run into that, this was a cakewalk. So everything that I've been looking up, that nut usually doesn't come out that hard. And to be honest, if that steering box was out on the bench, I don't know how a guy would have been able to get that nut out. I think it had to have been attached to the frame to get enough leverage to get that thing out. So hopefully you've got better luck than I do when it comes to that. But I got it back together, and so far it's not leaking out of there. So I'd say it's a success, and we'll see how long it lasts. So good luck if you try this at yourself. Hopefully you don't have to fabricate a bunch of tools like I did.